You've probably heard this before, but real estate is all about buying in the right location. You want to make sure you buy in the right location because you put all your hard earned money into this property and you can't just magically transport the property if you end up buying in a bad neighborhood. So in this video today, we're going to go through how do you determine the best place to purchase a property and rent it out to high quality tenants. So there are several steps to determine what's the best location to invest in. Step number one is choosing the right strategy because different strategies work best in different locations. For example, Airbnb, you'll probably want to be near a top vacation spot such as the beach or maybe in the mountains is a good place to invest. However, in the case of a flip, for example, you'll probably want to invest in a gentrifying neighborhood that still has properties that are run down that you can add value to, that you can really revitalize. But you also want to make sure that the neighborhood is still a safe neighborhood so that you could sell it at a high end price point to a high end buyer. And now let's say instead your strategy is student housing, which is my strategy. I invest near college towns and hospitals, hospitals and top colleges, because I can usually get a really high quality graduate student there or somebody who's doing their residency or fellowship at one of the local hospitals, basically medical interns. And so that's a really good tenant base for me because I purchased very close by the hospital or the college that I invest near. Okay, so now that you've figured out what strategy you want to use, the second step is to figure out what your budget is. Are you going to be buying a property that's $300,000 or are you going to buy a property that's like $1 million? Obviously, it's very location dependent. If you're buying a property in San Francisco, you might be forced to buy something that's like $2 million. And a 20% down on a $2 million property will be like $400,000. Now, not everyone has $400,000 that they can put towards a property. So it's very important to figure out, okay, what's the cost of the property and then what's my down payment? Typically, a down payment will be 20% of the total price of the property. If you're buying like a $300,000 property, let's say, which is a pretty average cost of the property across the US, then you'll want to have at least $60,000 to budget for that down payment. Now, the down payment's not the only thing you have to consider. You also have to consider your closing costs, putting in furniture, miscellaneous expenses. Now, a lot of times things like closing costs can be negotiated with the seller, but you want to make sure that you have the funds available and that you can actually afford to buy that house in the neighborhood that you want to invest in. Now, some people who have a low budget, obviously you might be looking at neighborhoods that prices are in the $200,000 range. For example, the state of Ohio has a lot of cities that the median home pricing is like $200,000 or less. So that's step number two. All right, now step number three is to determine how much rent you're actually able to charge in that particular area, because depending on the rent prices and what your mortgage payment is, it really determines what your cash flow will be and if you're going to be profitable or not. So the first place I go to determine how much I could charge at a particular address is rentometer.com. You can actually put in your address, you put in how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms that you have. Basically, you put in all that information and it will spit out how much you can charge on average for the rent in that particular area. It will give you an average and it'll tell you the 25 percentile and 75 percentile, basically the lowest you can charge in rent and the highest that you'll probably charge in rent. And it'll really give you a good idea of if that rental is going to be profitable or not. Now, if you're not going to rent to a whole family, and if you instead rent by the bedroom, you can actually make a lot more than renting out the whole house by renting by the bedroom instead. So to determine how much you can get by the bedroom, you instead have to go to Facebook housing groups. That's one of the best places to determine how much people are charging on a per bedroom basis. Other sites are roomies.com and Craigslist, Rooms and Shares. You want to make sure you do your research there and see, okay, if I could charge $600 per bedroom and I have 6 bedrooms, that means total I can charge $3,600 for this whole rental. Now, step number 4 is to determine how safe the neighborhood is and how popular that neighborhood is. Now, to determine how popular a neighborhood is, you want to go to Reddit. And by the way, this is so important because how popular a neighborhood is and how safe it is determines how much rent you can typically charge. So to determine how popular it is, I go to reddit.com and I'll basically search best places to live in whatever city I'm looking for, and then I'll just type in Reddit. And I'll read through all the Reddit forums and posts that I can find that tell me what neighborhoods are people really living in so that I can buy in those particular neighborhoods. And generally, I will see very good rent, I'll see very good appreciation, etc., etc. Now, there's a second website that's really good. It's called crimegrade.org. And this site is really good for figuring out what neighborhoods are safe to invest in. So it basically has a heat map of the area of the city, and it'll tell you areas that are less safe, it will be in red, and areas that are pretty safe, very safe, are in green. And ultimately, you want to invest in areas that are relatively safe, but also take it with a grain of salt because it doesn't tell you on a per neighborhood basis if this street is safe versus this street is not safe. It just kind of gives you a general distribution of what are some generally safe areas or generally unsafe areas. All right, now once you do that, the step number 5 is to figure out what the local occupancy/vacancy rate is. To do this, I usually call up apartments in that local area and ask them how many units are currently available and how many units do you have total, and then that will tell me how occupied they are. The higher the occupancy rate, the more popular that neighborhood or area is, and the more appreciation you'll probably see in that area as well. Now, another thing I like to do is I will talk to landlords directly that I see on Facebook housing groups, for instance, and I'll ask them questions like, hey, are you getting a lot of applicants for your house? I just want to know how popular this listing is. And if they are getting a ton of applicants, then that shows you that this is a great neighborhood. You can likely charge near the higher end or the premium end of the rent range when you rent your property out. Finally, step number 6 is to find a realtor and actually do some home walkthroughs. I recommend doing at least 3 to 5 home walkthroughs before you even put an offer on a property because we really want to narrow down the property that you're putting an offer on, how it compares to other properties in that area and what condition it is in versus the other ones in that area, and if it's actually at a really good price point based off of its condition, the location, etc. Once you feel comfortable on what property that you're going to buy, the final step, step number 7, is to put an offer on the property. And that's pretty much it. That's how you really determine what location to invest in, which neighborhood to invest in, and then what specific house you want to invest in. I hope that video was helpful for you guys. And if you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments down below. As well as if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends so it can really help others who are struggling with getting into real estate investing. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you on next week's video.